Top 10 Most Notorious Crimes in American History. Passion, greed, insanity, the remaining reasons that crimes are committed, and while most crimes are quickly forgotten, except by the people directly involved, some are still remembered and talked about decades later. In the Most Notorious Crimes in American History, the Life magazine rounds up some of the most mysterious, gruesome, and shocking crimes in American history. In today's episode, we select 10 of the most notorious crimes in American history. Number 10. Sacco and Vanzetti, April 15, 1920. Long live anarchy. Those were the last words spoken by Nicholas Sacco before he was electrocuted on August 23, 1927. Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were two anarchist Italian immigrants who were found guilty of killing a paymaster and a guard of a shoe factory in South Braintree, Massachusetts in April 1920 and of stealing $16,000 in payroll money. The two were brought together by the support of anarchist Luigi Giuliani's militant activities and fled to Mexico in 1917 to avoid being drafted to fight in World War I. Their trial received worldwide attention. Both were arrested in connection to the shoe factory robbery, even though they had never been convicted of a crime before, and they were found guilty by a jury despite contradictions in eyewitnesses' testimonies and questionable ballistics evidence. The trial was largely perceived as being unfair and sparked protests that eventually forced the Massachusetts governor to order an investigatory commission, which agreed with the jury. These countless books and legal reviews written on the trial have now mostly confirmed Sacco's guilt, but Vanzetti's remains questioned. Number 9. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, February 14, 1929. Prohibition was a windfall for organized crime in America and for gangsters Alphonse, the Scarface Al, Capone, and George Bucks, Moron in particular. The two gangsters' rivalry led to one of the best-known incidents of organized crime in the US, which led to the killing of 6 mobsters and one other person on Valentine's Day in 1929. One of the Capone's top men, Jack Machine Gun McGurn, was sure Moron had tried to kill him twice before he decided to stage a setup designed to kill Moron and some of his men. He lured Moron into a garage at 2122 North Clark Street in Chicago by pretending there was an opportunity to buy cheap whiskey from a bootlegger. Moron went for it. Though he was not one of the 7 men killed that day, he was either late or saw the police car in front of the house and hid, according to varying accounts. The police car Moron might have seen was a fake one. This was part of McGurn's plot. 4 people entered the garage, 2 men wearing police uniforms and 2 men dressed in plain clothes. The plan was to make it look like a regular raid against bootlegging, and the plan worked perfectly. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, as it would come to be known, also marked a turning point for the fight against gangs in Chicago. At the time, William Russell, the police commissioner of the city, said, "We're going to make this the knell of gangdom in Chicago." Number 8. Watergate Break-In, June 17, 1972. The Watergate Hotel was known as anything more than a fancy Washington, D.C. hotel until June 17, 1972, when 5 men were arrested in the wee hours of the morning after trying to bug the offices of the Democratic National Committee. The DNC was running its candidate, George McGovern, against the incumbent Richard Nixon. McGovern would lose in a landslide, but the Watergate scandal and the resulting cover-up would haunt the Nixon administration over the next 2 years. The GOP's committee to re-elect the president, officially known as the CRP, but later known as CREEP, went to criminal lengths to ensure that its man stayed in the office by breaking into the DNC's office, led by a mysterious inside source called Deep Throat. To interpret Washington Post reporters traced the wrongdoing from the arrest of the 5 men to the highest level of the administration. On August 9, 1974, the Washington Post, which had doggedly followed the case, ran an article on the front page that stated, "Richard Milhouse Nixon announced last night that he will resign as the 37th President of the United States at noonday." The scandal rocked the nation to the core. Nixon said, "I regret deeply any injuries that may have been done in the course of these events that led to this decision." Nixon's Vice President, Gerald Ford, would pardon Nixon of his crimes, but the damage Nixon's reputation had been done. Number 7. The Lindbergh Baby Kidnapping, March 1, 1932. The kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh's 20-month-old child on March 1, 1932 was dubbed the crime of the century at the time. In 1927, Lindbergh was the first man to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic from New York to Paris. He subsequently received the $25,000 all-take prize, the French Legion d'Honneur, and the U.S. Medal of Honor. He was widely viewed as an American hero. This explains the shock and coverage that the kidnapping of his young son received in 1932. The boy disappeared from his crib on the second floor of the family house in New Jersey, where a ransom note demanding $50,000 was found. The note said that the child was in good care, and the family immediately called the state police. A few days later, a new note upped the ransom by $20,000. What followed was a weird string of events, including a retired teacher who volunteered to be a go-between and met twice with the alleged kidnapper. During the second meeting, the teacher handed over the ransom and was told to look for the child in a boat off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. But the child was nowhere to be found. A little over 2 months after the kidnapping, the body of the child was found in the woods close to Lindbergh's home in New Jersey. The New York Times reported that there was a strong possibility that he had been killed on the very night of the kidnapping. The FBI then started to investigate the matter, and on September 19, 1934, arrested Bruno Richard Hauptmann. The German-born man was hiding $13,750 of the ransom in his garage. He was indicted on charges of extortion and later murder and kidnapping. His trial began in January 1935, and a jury found him guilty on February 13. He was electrocuted to death on April 3, 1936. Many conspiracy theories have resurfaced around the kidnapping, including the fact that the child's nanny might have been involved and that the retired teacher was also to blame. Many also maintain that Hauptmann did not get a fair trial because of Lindbergh's status and fame. Number 6. Assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., April 4, 1968. Even early in King's life, it was clear that he would be a force to be reckoned with in the fight for equal rights. Born in 1929 in Atlanta, King witnessed the inequalities in the American South under oppressive Jim Crow laws. Unlike other civil rights leaders of the time, King modeled his movement after Gandhi's nonviolent noncompliance. King vocally criticized racial inequality and the Vietnam War, which earned him the respect of many and a wiretap from the FBI. But that didn't stop him from leading a march to Washington, D.C. to deliver his I Have a Dream speech. But while King was ushering the nation into a new era of equality and inclusion, a career criminal named James L. Ray broke out of prison. On April 4, 1968, as King stood on the balcony of a Memphis motel room, a shot rang out, passing through King's neck and chin. King would be pronounced dead an hour later. Ray was eventually captured and confessed to the killing. He later recanted his confession and claimed a man named Raoul was the mastermind behind the plot. Ray's checkered past and his reference to the Raoul character have spawned numerous conspiracy theories. Number 5. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy, November 22, 1963. The assassination of President Kennedy may be most researched, talked about, debated, and contested crime in all of American history. The Warren Commission, which was assigned to investigate the murder, found that a 24-year-old Marine veteran named Lee Harvey Oswald, and Oswald alone, shot Kennedy from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas. But for many skeptics, the findings of the Warren Commission raised more questions than answers. Oswald was raised by a single mother in New Orleans. Throughout his life, he showed an inability to settle down, and he became enamored with communism and tried to live in Moscow, but he was denied citizenship. After shooting Kennedy, Oswald fled the building and killed a police officer along the way, and when he was finally apprehended, he famously said, "I'm just a patsy." This statement, along with Oswald's murder at the hands of the vigilante local strip club owner Jack Ruby, has spawned numerous conspiracy theories. How was such a high-profile suspect killed by a random vigilante? How did Oswald orchestrate the attack? Was he working with the Cubans, the Russians? The nation lost a young, charismatic president in his prime, and with Oswald dead, we may never truly know why. Number 4. The murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, June 12, 1994. Orenthal James O.J. Simpson was one of the greatest old-time running backs in college football. When Simpson's ex-wife was brutally murdered along with a friend in Los Angeles' expensive Brentwood neighborhood on June 12, 1992, many initially felt sympathy for Simpson. But the police quickly began to investigate Simpson. Detectives at the scene of the crime found bloody footprints and a bloody glove. A search of Simpson's home turned up bloodstains on his driveway car and socks. Then the police asked Simpson to turn himself in, but he was nowhere to be found. A surreal low-speed car chase ensued, with the police following a white Ford Bronco carrying Simpson. The chase was broadcast on live TV, and it ended when Simpson reached his home and surrendered. The next 6 months gave way to an epic legal battle that may rightly claim the title of Trial of the Century. In just 4 hours, the jury decided that Simpson was not guilty. To this day, the crime remains one of the best known in American history. Number 3. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln, April 14, 1865. Fresh off his second inauguration and the salvation of the Union, Lincoln went to see the popular comedy Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. on April 14, 1865. One of the most notorious assassinations in American history took place there, as the actor turned Confederate radical John Wilkes Booth sneaked up behind the president, drew a pistol, and fired a single shot at the back of Lincoln's head. Lincoln died the next morning. Booth, who had previously performed in Ford's Theater, knew the scene of the crime very well. He had also been stalking Lincoln for some time, and he held a fanatical pro-slavery position and desperately wanted to see the South freed from the rule of Lincoln. It is rumored that Booth belonged to the clandestine Knights of the Golden Circle, whose members were fierce opponents of the Union. At some point, he planned to kidnap the president in exchange for thousands of Confederate soldiers, but he was foiled by a last-minute itinerary change. On March 4, 1865, at Lincoln's second inauguration, Booth stood up on a balcony behind the president. The Civil War ended a month later, and days later Booth killed one of the greatest U.S. presidents of all time. Number 2. Oklahoma City bombing. April 19, 1995. April 19 holds historic significance for the U.S. On April 19, 1775, the shot heard around the world was fired in Massachusetts, beginning the Revolutionary War. On April 19, 1993, federal agents stormed the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, with a fire destroying the compound and taking the lives of more than 70 people. And on April 19, 1995, former U.S. Army soldier Timothy McVeigh drove a truck filled with 2.5 tons of homemade explosive up to Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building and detonated it, killing 168 and injuring 800 people. McVeigh saw himself as acting in revenge for the heavy-handed response to the Waco, Texas courts. He chose the federal building because he believed the agents responsible worked there. He killed 16 children in a daycare facility and more than 150 other people. McVeigh was executed on June 11, 2001. Number 1. The murder of Lassie Peterson, December 24, 2002. Lassie Peterson was killed just before Christmas in 2002. At the time, she was 8 months pregnant with her first child. It was her husband, Scott Peterson, who reported her missing on Christmas Eve, saying he had last seen her that morning when they left for an all-day fishing trip. From the start, the police detective in charge of the inquiry said something that did not seem right. A few days later, a woman from Fresco, Amber Frey, called the police after seeing the coverage of Lassie's disappearance, telling them that Peterson had been her boyfriend for over 1 month. As the police continued to investigate the murder, they found out that Peterson had bought a $250,000 life insurance policy on his wife. The body of a tiny baby turned up in San Francisco Bay in April, and the next day, one of the women appeared less than 5 miles from where Peterson had said he was fishing on Christmas Eve. A few days later, the police arrested him in San Diego with $15,000 in cash on him. After it was confirmed that the bodies were those of Lassie Peterson and his son, Peterson was charged with 2 counts of murder. After several months of a highly publicized investigation and 5 months of trial, the jury returned a guilty verdict on November 12. Peterson was later sentenced to death and is on death row at San Quentin State Prison in California. He still claims his innocence.
Thank you for watching, And please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more videos on crime stories, notorious outlaws, and historical scandals.